Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week on Savvy, we host new individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their expertise, dreams, and lessons learned in their field of business. Our guest today is none other than Deb Scott, the four-time award-winning author of The Sky is Green and the Grass is Blue. Top rated in 20 categories with over 1 million global listeners. In her personal life, Deb has battled sexual abuse, a dysfunctional family, depression, and was the sole caregiver to both her parents until their passing with cancer. She has even experienced financial devastation. Deb knows about frustration, suffering, and loss. Deb believes it's not life's inevitable troubles which keep us stuck and discouraged, but our lack of understanding how to utilize these experiences as tools and valuable resources to build a better outcome with more joy, peace, and happiness. To find out more about Deb, go to her website at www.greenskyandbluegrass.com. Well, Deb, I am so excited to have you on Savvy Central Radio today. How are you?
Oh, my goodness. That was quite the intro. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just feeling the love. Talk about the global group hug here. That was very kind. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here with you.
Well, I'm honored to have you on. I'm actually a fan of your show. I listen to your show very often. You have amazing guests on. And let me tell the audience where they can listen to your wonderful show. Deb is the award-winning show, as I said in my intro, the award-winning podcaster for the Best People We Know show on Blog Talk Radio. You can always listen to her show on www.blogtalkradio.com/The Best People We Know. So check you out. And when do you have your shows exactly? Because I just get the updates, and I just tune in whenever I'm sent the updates.
Oh, my goodness, you're so cute. Yes, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m., but sometimes, we get a guest, and you totally understand this, and thank you so much for being so kind, because I'm a big fan of your show as well. But oftentimes we get a guest in another country, and the time changes or their schedule, and then we will change the time to be more convenient. As we had Dr. Caroline Leaf on Friday, and she was typically we do a Thursday show, but we did Friday with her at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to get her on. So, things like that, it's all good.
No, I get you. We had a wonderful guest on our show this past Friday, Martin Lindstrom. I'm a super big fan of his. I don't know if you got to read his book, Deb. He wrote Biology, The Truth About...
I haven't read it, but I've
really
one
awesome.
that I have, one more that I need to read. I love books, as you know.
He is so infectious, his energy, and I never really loved marketing and the subject of marketing, but you listen to him speak, and you just, want to become a marketer. It's like...
I know. I tell you, it's so great, isn't it, how the world is... the one thing about social media and your radio show, and I know for me it's true, I have met so many amazing people. We do this as a service to help other people, but honest to gosh, I'm first in line, holding my hand up. I've just learned so many wonderful things through the guests, through the listeners. It's just been tremendous.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I can totally say that all the guests I've been on, even some people who you would think, okay, they're new-time business owners or whatever, everyone has something to contribute, and all their experiences mean something. So, yeah, I've learned tremendous from all of our listeners. And I'd love if you could tell our audience, how did this get going for you? Because you are a award-winning author on top of it. Your book is called The Sky is Green and the Grass is Blue, and then you're now an award-winning podcaster. How did this all come about for you, becoming a podcaster and a best-selling author and all this? Tell our audience a little bit about your background story.
Well, Christina, it's funny because sometimes we make plans, and as the saying goes, God laughs. And for me... It's so true. It's like as I was saying before we went on air, it's like, okay, so my life is none of my business here sometimes because God always has a surprise. But, my training in college was in biology, and I was going to become a med tech until I did that and realized that the blood agar was not really very communicative. And I just going to go crazy in the lab, even though I loved being a teacher's aide in biology and all of those things. So I ended up taking the biology degree, and I ended up going into medical sales. And I did that for 20 years. So, I eventually focused in on cardiac and cardiothoracic surgery. So I was in surgery a lot. I was selling like beating heart surgery equipment, saphenous vein harvesting, and things like that. And I loved the team environment of the operating room staff. It was great, doing something that I think was making a difference. And I loved it. I really did. It had its ups and downs, which is a whole other book I think that needs to be written, because when I started that, it was really a man's industry. And there were a lot of lessons in there, which I try to bridge the professional business and business of living in my message to people. But when, a company, the last company I worked for was selling, and I just ended up taking a break. I wanted to take a break, and it turned out that my mother was very sick and didn't know that she had cancer at the time, but that ended up being a blessing, because I was able to take care of her and until she passed at Mass General, and she fought the good fight. And then, of course, her and my dad had been married for so many years, they couldn't live without each other. He passed away the year after that. One of the things that my mom told me I had to do before she passed away was, you got to finish that book. It was always something that was in there. Inside of me. And I think for somebody listening right now, if you've had something inside of you that you feel, I should really do that, but you just never quite get to it. And if other people are telling you, like I had a lot of customers tell me, Deb, you should write a book about that. Deb, you should write a book. I had surgeons telling me, Deb, you should put that in a book. I would read that book. So I think that there's a lot of divine appointments with messages to help us along the way. I don't know if you feel that way, but things just happen and doors opened, and the book got written, and then I was a guest on radio shows, and I was so inspired by many of the hosts in the shows I had been on and the interviews that I ended up starting that, and one thing leads to another. But it's really been, whether it was cardiac surgery, the heart, the beating heart, the flesh and blood heart, or the heart that we're talking about now in people, the business of living your purpose, being happy, how to turn things around, the bad stuff into the good stuff, we're all the same underneath the skin suit. We all beat the same color blood. And the common threads, from reading a book that was something from Plato's writing to today, you can have these emotional connections, because the human condition, we're all so similar. And I think that that's the exciting thing, is how much we help each other in being the best person we were created to be.
I love that target and that focus, because it is true. As I said prior, I think everyone has something to contribute, whether you're a business right out of the gate, or you've been in business a long time, or you're a top leading expert. It doesn't matter. Everyone has life experiences and gifts, God-given gifts that they can present to the world and make the world a better place with their talents and gifts.
Absolutely. And I think we have to expect the unexpected sometimes. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm a fan of quotes on Twitter, but I'm always saying you can't unscramble the scrambled eggs, but you can always come up with delicious and delightful new recipes for omelets. And I think that that's kind of how life is sometimes, and I'm not sure about you, or maybe some of the listeners too. It's like, wow, all of a sudden you wake up and it's like 20, 30, 40 and beyond, and you're like, wow, life goes in the blink of an eye. And we have to get active in the business of living. And we owe it to ourselves and those around us to be the best person we were created to be. And there's not a person on planet Earth that hasn't had some suffering and some junk that they want to dump. But I think that key is, how do you turn it? How do you transform it? How do you flick, that switch to find those good things that come out of the bad things? Because none of us are finished yet. I don't mean to be morbid, but none of us are staying. So we still have an opportunity. And just because we don't know what that blessing is now, it doesn't mean that we won't tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now. Thank God for the unanswered prayers, and don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle. So that's what I'm about. I'm just about, mostly because I need it in my own life, because, I've had some stuff that I wish didn't happen to me. But on the other hand, when I look at the fruits, the good fruits that came out of that, I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't give that up, because if that's what it took for this to happen, if that pile of manure is what I needed to grow the good garden in my life, then it's worth it. And that's what I believe we can all do for each other.
Oh, you hit on so many awesome points there, Deb. And what I'm loving, and I totally get you in taking that leap and living your best life, even if you don't see where it's going to turn out, or even if your life seems like, as you say, a pile of manure right now. You don't know where those fruits are going to end up. And I was a testament to leaving corporate on faith after one day of praying and going to work one day. And I was having a really stressful job, and in particular had ended up a couple months prior in the hospital with chest pains. And my boss's attitude, well, you didn't actually die of a heart attack, so you should have come into work before going to the hospital. Yeah, seriously.
Hello, wake up call.
And when that happened, I just totally just kept going and kept coming into work, kept having health issues. And one day while I was on my way to work and I was praying, I said, God, I don't know how much longer I can take this, but I feel if I were to quit, you wouldn't have my back, because I'd be a quitter. And I've never been a quitter. Like, that was something I built in my head, that I can't quit. And God said, well, who says you're quitting, and who says I wouldn't have your back? That's what I felt him saying. And I said, you know what? Then I'm quitting today. And I felt him say, okay, then I gotcha. And so I went in there and just cold on quit. And it was the best decision I ever made. And God has continued to surprise me, along with showing me what my greatest passion and purpose is, which is Savvy Central Radio. And I would have never, Deb, if you had seen me prior, I was a worker bee who never talked to people very much. I was very shy at work, and here I am talking to people all week long. I would have never pictured me doing this. So it is the greatest gift that I would have not known had I not stepped out in faith and just, lived my gifts, but without knowing how it was going to turn out.
Yeah, and I got to give you the kudos, because I've been on a fair amount of interviews, and let me tell you, you are A+++ on the follow-up, the preparation, the details. I don't know how you do it. It's just unbelievable. So kudos to you. And I think that that's one of the things, when you're living your purpose, you're going to automatically have that passion. You're going to automatically have that courage. And your story is such a testimony to that. And I know it's an inspiration for so many others. Everybody has fear. Everybody has those feelings of, could this really work? But that doesn't mean that you don't overcome those and gain the reward that, the prize that's at the end. There's nothing. Nobody's, falling out of bed with their gold medal around their neck from the Olympics. There's some training, and it's part of the process. But, that's why that cliche, no pain, no gain, sometimes, those little statements last throughout the years for good reason, because they're true. And I love how you put in the faith, and I would compliment that. One of the things, people say, well, what are the 3 things that you think you need to do to be able to turn this bad stuff into good stuff? And one of my first things is always faith in God. Now, to me, it doesn't matter what your faith is for God. For me, I'm Catholic, and I'm a happy Catholic, but, that's still Christian, too. A lot of people don't think that Catholics are Christians, but we are. So whatever it is, whatever your faith is, even my friends that don't really have faith in anything, you have to have a faith that there's something greater than you out there. when you look at life and you really are in the present moment and see how things synchronize so perfectly and how little we know in the science world about how we even, everything about ourselves, how our bodies run, how everything happens the way it does, you have to have, like Einstein said, either everything's a miracle or none of it's a miracle. So I think that faith in God is that one thing you have to do. And I really want people to know that that's a very unselfish thing, to say, well, put God first. Oh, that seems like what a rotten, unloving, unhappy. What kind of a God would do that? Well, let me tell you, that is the most freeing thing you can do for yourself. Visualize this or consider this. There's 1,000 people who want you to be a certain way, and you're trying to please 1,000 people. Or you have God who is at the top of the pinnacle, and you only have to worry about pleasing God, and then everybody else falls into place. It's much easier. It's a lot less effort, and it's more rewarding if you just focus on pleasing God and not pleasing all the people. Because, people, I don't know about you, but getting along with myself most days is a lot of work, so trying to get along with everybody else is not going to happen. I think that that's a really important thing, to believe that you're here for a purpose. God created you for a purpose, and you made it this far. God took care of you up to this point, and He will continue to bring you to where you need to be if you're open. And, that is the number one thing I've learned in business, cardiac surgery sales, or the self-development realm. You have to have a focus. You have to have a moral compass. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. You can never be successful, and there's not one person that I've met, mentored, had a mentor, whatever, that hasn't had that attribute. And when you say that that's true from the people that you've interviewed?
Yeah, most definitely it is. And as you said, not everyone comes to the table with a structure of faith, but everyone, I think, somewhere deep inside of them knows there's something greater than just yourself or just the people around you. And you might not be able to put it into words, and scientists will say, well, it's this or that, but the glory and magnificence and how everything is structured so perfectly organized, because I love organization, as you might have guessed.
Yes, just a little, do you think? Hello!
And that's something else I wanted to bring into onto the table here, is that I think, we're innately given talents and gifts by God. And one of them is organization. Another is listening and talking to people, because I've always done that. One of my favorite things to do is get together with a cup of coffee and a good girlfriend or a guy friend and just chit-chat with them and hear their stories and share stories. And so it's one of the things that I remember just before I started this show, one of my friends says, I can't wait to see you and to hear your stories, because you really make them so exciting. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I never knew I had stories. But that's something I wanted to mention. Our God-given talents are so innate to us that we don't realize and we don't even notice them, that we go through life and say, hey, everyone can draw a picture, or everyone can speak well, or whatever your talent is. So we take it for granted, our gifts, our talents, and we don't use them to the fullest. And so that is kind of, I think, a disservice to yourself, to mankind, and to God.
Yeah, and I think that's so beautiful that you say that, and I just echo it so loudly, because it is a hard lesson sometimes to learn, but the compare and the despair, and don't do it. You really, it's that quote that says, you want to know what the other person's answer is on the life exam, but you don't realize that they have a different question. So I think that sometimes, with especially, reality TV and Hollywood and the glam, it's all about be like this person, wear what that person's wearing, have that person's figure, do this. That just doesn't work. You really are never going to find that counterfeit spiritual satisfaction from somebody else's ghost and cloud that you can never hold or grasp. You really will only find that inner peace and that inner happiness when you're plugged in the way you're supposed to work. And if we spent that amount of time, as you said, focusing on what are my talents, what do I enjoy doing, what am I good at, what do people compliment me at, and not take for granted if you can do something great, if you can do something easily, doesn't mean the next person can. Mm-hmm. And that's how we all help each other, and why it's important to do that. You know, the unexamined life is not worth living. You have to examine who you are, what you're good at. That is, don't make it more difficult than it is. If you're good at talking, do something that is in communications. You know, if you're good at organization, do something where organization helps. And don't, it's like, I call it the daffodil tulip syndrome. You know, daffodils don't go around saying, I want to be a tulip, and a tulip doesn't want to be a daffodil. They're both flowers, and they're both beautiful, and they're different, but one's not better than the other. And you want different. You want contrast. That's what makes something more majestic and more beautiful. You know, if you're wearing a red dress and you're against the contrast of a black background, you pop more, you know. You're gonna be who you are. You're gonna pop more. You're gonna be happier, you know, in that contrast. So the delight is in the difference. You know, don't be discouraged by the difference. Consider it a delight. And that's kind of that whole turn things around. That I love to do that, turn things around. I always love to see, you know, how can that be reworked? Where's that good thing inside there? What can come of that? What's the possibility? And shows like this, like yours, you know, you surround yourself in transformation, and you become, you know, what you're attracting, and you attract what you become. And it's really important to have that self-love, to know I'm worth listening to Savvy Central Radio, or I'm worth reading, you know, the Deb's book, or I'm worth taking the time to examine my talents. You know, these are all tools to use that you can prove to yourself. You know, don't take my word for it. Prove it to yourself. Prove me wrong. You know, prove to me how wrong I am when you discover your talents, and then you're living your purpose if you're not more happy and peaceful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I had left corporate, as I said, I actually didn't start out with my purpose because I had no idea what it was. So I said, I'm going to do what I did in corporate, but as a free enterprise, and be a financial consultant. And I hired a mentor, and we worked together, and she, you know, several months in, when I'm having dismal results, she's like, okay, so do you love what you're doing? I said, no, heck no, I don't love it at all. And she said straight out to me, well, if you don't love it, you're not going to be successful at it. This is not a 9-to-5 job. This is, you've got to live, breathe, and eat your business. So what do you love to do? And I'm like, I love walking, talking, dogs, and coffee. I can't see making a living out of any of those. And she's like, trust me, if you have a passion, there's a way to make it into a vocation. Just write, just journal. And so I did just what she instructed. I started journaling, and this whole starting the show thing came about because a friend got interviewed on Blog Talk Radio. And from that, she got an actual radio job. And after listening to her interview, I felt, you know what I'm talking about, Deb, when you get that pull inside where God's speaking to you, and sometimes he's screaming at you like, you need to go there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. God said, you need to do that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I can't do that. I'm not a host. And I'm like, pushing it away. It took me, even after starting the show, it took me 6 months to step into it after God gave me that pull. And so that's, you know, sometimes it just takes just doing what I'm doing, just keeping yourself open, as you said, Deb, and just writing about it and exploring. And then when you get that call, that, you know, listen to that small voice, or sometimes as it gets louder and louder voice.
Yeah, it really is. It is amazing how, when you consider your life an unexpected adventure, like you said, doors seem to open and others seem to shut, and things just seem to happen on their own. But we know that it is orchestrated, you know, in beautiful reasons. But a lot of people will say that quote: "Everything happens for a reason." You know, you have to live your life forward. You sometimes only understand it in the 20/20 hindsight. But that's the good news. Those building blocks along the way help you get, nothing is wasted. That work experience you had in that job that you weren't so happy about, or maybe some of the things that I learned the hard way, School of Hard Knocks, they weren't necessarily easy lessons, but they were very valuable. And, bringing them forward today, I'm better because of those things. And we learn from each other. I can't live, that's what I love about books, Christina, because you can't live 80 years of somebody else's life. But gosh, if I can, for 10 or 15 bucks, get their wisdom in a few hours reading their story, how priceless is that? And the more you download software into your computer, the more things you can do with it. And our mind is the same way. The more positive input we can get in it, the more our mind can create new possibilities, the more potential we have. But we have to get it in. We have to be careful what we put in through those, eyes and ears and things like that. Dr. Caroline Leaf, I love her mind work in just talking about her being on Friday. One of the things that she said is because all of our thoughts are tangible energy, they're actual matter, they exist, that thoughts that maybe even were bad or we didn't like, that don't create a good emotion, we can even change those with that whole neuroplasticity. And taking that thought in the back of our mind, bringing it forward conscious, and then reworking it and attaching to it some of the good things that have resulted from it, puts it back into our brain, changed forever, never the same. And it's just exciting to me that we have that ability, to just unlimited potential. How many stories have you heard of people that have just beat the odds by miracles, that you can't even imagine? I love stories of hope like that. And we are all everyday heroes. We can all do that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that is true. I like what she's saying there, because your thoughts and even your words have power. And I don't think a lot of us realize our thoughts and then our words will equal what our actions end up being. So if your thoughts are all negative and you're just here and there a bit, complaining and such, that will work out what your general actions are going to be in your life, how proactive you are in living your best life and such.
And you can even see it on like brain scans. You can see those areas that are more shaded or less shaded. It's almost like you mess up your own circuitry. You know what I mean? It's like you put a roadblock in your own mind when you input the bad stuff. So that's why you have to change it around and make sure you're inputting some good things. But, one of the things that I hope people do, and maybe you can comment on it, is to just not be so hard on ourselves. I think that for me, sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. I think that's one of the lessons that I've learned is just, allow things and be more kind and more gentle to yourself, and know that you're not finished yet, and that, if you can work with a mentor or a coach or whoever listening to this radio show, you're already rewiring and reworking your mind to consider new possibilities. And it doesn't have to be difficult. That simple act of, as they say, you can drive home a different way, and you've already started that cascade of your mind going into searching for new ways of doing something different. There's just small things we can do. I call it successful sabotage. You can set yourself up for success by doing those simple things that automatically give you results, and they're fun, and they're easy, and they're effective.
Totally, I agree. And when you just open your mind up to reading different positive messages, listening to positive messages like your podcast or my podcast. And I have a teeny bit of story. One day, my sister came to me with some really awful news that just threw me for an absolute loop. And I was in such a foul mood after I got the news that I immediately went to a shop to get my daily bagel, and some guy was looking down at my breast, and I felt violated, and I immediately lost my temper at him, started screaming at him. He screamed at me all the way outside to the train station. I went down on the train. There was a fight inside the train while I was going to work, and then when I got off the train and went up the stairs, then there was another fight at the top of the stairs. And it was like, is there a full moon today? So, I still have this foul mood going on. I go upstairs and I do my day, and then by the end of the day, something happened where a friend said something positive that made me laugh, and it kind of just did that little switch in my head that changed my perspective from being in a foul mood to being more uplifting and positive. And then from that moment on, it was like a ripple. Everything around me seemed happy. I saw people laughing in the street. There was no more fighting. And it was at that aha moment that I realized that I had the power with my thoughts and my reaction to things going on around me that could change the way I saw my environment and how my life turned out.
I love that story. That is like, let's just frame that one and, put the Post-it note to our head. It's so true. And that's why I love quotes, because it's like Albert Hubbard, don't take your life too seriously. You'll never get out alive. I mean, sometimes a sense of humor is the best medicine without the side effects, as they say in Proverbs. But honestly, I love that because when we laugh, it's so, when you find that sense of humor in things, your body's releasing endorphins. And what do endorphins do? Endorphins increase that dopamine and the serotonin. And what does that do? Well, that makes you feel good. And it's just amazing how all of a sudden you've transformed that bad thing into something good by what? By clicking that switch of finding the humor in it. And I think that's so important because it goes with the theme of what we're talking about today. That one thing, finding that sense of humor. Look at how much that shifted your entire perspective. It's like getting those God glasses on. It's like saying, okay, I can't see what I want to read, but as soon as I grab those glasses, everything becomes crystal clear. It's like, okay, you wanted to get out of the rut, you were feeling bad, you didn't like that feeling, and you wanted a different perspective, and you got those the humor glasses on, and you saw things in a way that you wouldn't have seen without it. And it doesn't mean that, just because you don't see something in this moment doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you don't feel some way that you want to feel in this moment doesn't mean that you won't. And I think that sometimes, being in the present moment is really important so that we can appreciate with gratitude the gifts that we're given. But we also have to remember that, the future is not written, and we have no idea, what possibilities are right around that corner. And I don't know about you, but I would rather be sticking to the story of, okay, something great, there's a happy ending yet to be written, than taking, some doom and gloom effort, because there's always, nobody that I know, and even the psychic twins, okay? I mean, nobody knows everything. Nobody knows what's going to happen to each individual person. And if you don't know, then why try to consider, consider the best possibility. Don't consider the worst possibility, because there's a lot of things that can go right instead of wrong.
You are so right, Deb, because it's true. I mean, I had several months ago, I was putting together an event, and everything you can imagine went wrong for this event. I mean, speakers were getting sick, speakers had to cancel, this was going wrong, that was going wrong, and people around me with logical sense looked at it, and the perspective of looking at what looks like you see on the surface, it looked like a catastrophe. And people were like, just cancel. This is not going to work, And some people even used the God card and said, well, God's probably trying to tell you just to cancel. And that's not going to work out. And I prayed deeply about it, and I felt like, no, you're meant to go forward with this. This will work out. You can't see it right now, but it will. And lo and behold, it turned out to be a fabulous event. Everything came together all at the last minute. Literally within 24 hours, everything started to fall into place. But it's like talking about what you said earlier, Deb. It's like going on that faith and trust and just going forward, even if you can't see it in front of you, and having that gratitude for the gifts you can't even see in front of you that exist, but you can't see yet.
It's so true. What a great story, and what a great testimony. I love how you put your life and your love into action, and you walk your talk, and that's one of the things that I respect so much about you and I admire in your character, because, I think the world needs more people like you that are willing to say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to reflect. I'm going to pray. I'm going to listen to other people, but my life is between me and God, and me and God equal a majority. And that gets back to that original point we discussed, where if you put God first and God is at the top of the mountain and can see everything from a different perspective, when you and I are down at the bottom along with everybody else, then it kind of takes a lot of that responsibility and stress off my shoulders and puts it on God. And I don't know about you, but I think God probably has bigger shoulders than I do. So it's like, you know what? You brought me into this life. You can be responsible for me. Hello, hello, hello. So, there's a little bit of a tandem cooperation going on there, the dance in life between God and each one of us. But one of the things that we forget too often is that things that were great discoveries, things that were the greatest successes, sometimes they happen by the biggest accidents. I love that show, Mysteries at the Museum. I think I'm doing a shameless plug for them. I'm not involved with them at all, but it's on the History Channel, and it's the Mysteries of the Museum, and they have all these things that happened that are really, you would just never know unless you watched Histories of the Museum, right? Mm-hmm. And one of these great inventors, of course, can I remember his name? No, but great inventor, and he wanted to start, doing something with textiles, and wanted to create this thing. He just had this vision. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. This is going to be successful. Mm-hmm. And he was in his research lab, and he was testing all these things. And while he was trying to make one thing, he ended up creating this dye that was purple, and it fell onto some material. And no matter what he did, no matter how much he washed it out, this purple was not coming out. Well, lo and behold, he's like, now this is interesting, because in that day, clothes were dyed. There was no purple, or if you had purple, that's why we have royal purple. When you think of purple as being a royal color, this is why, because purple was made from the shells, and it was very difficult to get that color and to get a lot of it. So anyway, when he came out, nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody was interested in it. It wouldn't work. It was a synthetic color. It wasn't man-made like all the other colors had been, because the way everything had been is the way it should always be, right? Hello, that's like, hello, none of that is true. And I guess the Queen of England ended up falling in love with it, wore this beautiful purple gown made out of this mistake material, and then the whole world fell in love with it, and it became, because of his name, something to do with, became the mauve. Well, anyway, the royal purple. How did we get that? Here's a mistake. He had a plan. God had another idea. He had the mistake. He saw the opportunity. Where's the good thing and the bad thing that this ink fell on here and it doesn't come out? And he changed fabrics and histories and textiles and created a color that we all use today. But we don't think about that, do we? We don't think about how sometimes the greatest things, penicillin, looking for something else, creating something. There's so many great things. So how do you know today that the thing in your life that you hate the most won't be what you need the most and will love and appreciate the most this time next year? You don't. And this is why we have to help each other. And this is why I love being a guest on your show.
Aw, thank you, Deb. And I'm so excited to have you on. And you are so absolutely correct in that I remember reading about the Wright brothers, and they were told over and over and over again to quit this crazy dream of wanting to fly. Men don't fly. God did not put wings on our back. So that's evidence that we're not meant to fly. And people were very sure of themselves that, God means us not to get off the ground. We are people. We don't have wings. We should not be flying. Now do people even consider not flying? I had heard they made over 500 different prototypes that did not work until they got something that did work and get off the ground for flight.
It's so true. And I remember, I love that. That's amazing that you brought up that story, because, Brad Meltzer, pronouncing it right, he's the New York Times bestselling author. He was on the radio show, and he was talking about that exact example. And he was saying, what did the Wright brothers do? They brought out extra material because they anticipated when they did their test runs they were going to fail. Now, how is that for an example to ponder? They were determined, and they knew they could succeed, and they knew that they would fail, but they looked at the failures as one step closer, and they anticipated it. They brought extra material out there with them in their test runs, knowing that certain ones would crash. I think if we all just and why do we not want to continue on those dreams? What are we afraid of? What someone's going to think? Well, that gets back to my initial premise. Mm-hmm. Don't care about what other people think.
No.
If your life is between you and God, you take off all the stress and all the pressure of having to be responsible for what everybody else thinks of you. When you only have one person to think about, if you only have one person to please, all right, it's a lot easier, and you can get a lot more done, because then you don't have to be responsible for everything. And I think that the more you said something that you do, and there's so many scientific studies that back this up. You pray. 15 minutes of prayer, what it does to your blood pressure, what it does to, your entire system, what it does for your strength and your ability. I mean, I just am so amazed at how there's scientific facts to really back up what most of us intuitively feel is right. It's like, why do I feel more peaceful if I've been in quiet? It's like that St. Francis de Sales, when you only have a half an hour to pray, that's when you definitely need to pray for an hour.
Yeah.
It's like that one thing that we don't want to do is the very thing we need to do. And sometimes it's really important to stop and pause. And, that's a great story. But who knows? I mean, who knows where we'll be, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Look at all the things that have happened that we probably didn't anticipate. If you stop and really get honest with yourself and think about, what do you love about yourself the most? When were you the happiest? What are you doing when time goes by and you don't even know what time it is on the clock anymore because you're just so deep, in what you're doing? If you those are all great road signs. Those are all great examples that you don't have to listen to somebody else's story. You have your own story. You have the answers right within you if you ask the question. You're not going to get the answer if you don't ask the right question. And sometimes we forget to do that. I really think that sometimes we say, oh, well, that won't happen or that couldn't happen. Well, stop and think of the things that have happened that you loved the most in your life. Did you ever expect them? And the answer is probably going to be no. Well, hello, you just proved it to yourself with your own witness of your own life. Why is it any different for tomorrow than it was from yesterday? Do you know what I mean? Any of that make any sense?
Most absolutely, definitely. It totally makes sense. And I love you bringing that up because, again, you don't know until you just start living your life and stop thinking about what other people say and you, as you were saying before about being quiet, for me, a lot of times quiet is really hard for me. I want to, be in 10 different places at once. I like to always be in action. But what I found is that throughout the day is if I include, now I don't see prayer just sitting down sometimes. I see I'm going through something in the middle of the day and I just decide to talk to God in my head right there. And we have that conversation throughout the day, something will come up and I say, hey, I really need your presence right now because I'm going to lose it, because there are times where I'm not doing well with a certain situation. So, it can be like a moment in your day that you just decide to include God. And if you're not comfortable with the idea of God being in your life, like what happened to me at 12 years old when I had no relationship, and that's what it basically is. You're building a relationship with God. And I would say from there, a friend of mine who had first introduced me to the Bible, she said, do you know the good book? And I was like, what's that? And so we just talked about it and whatever, and I started to read on verses on the side. It was one day when she just said to me, hey, you don't believe in God, but hey, if you don't believe in God, why don't you just try praying one day and see what happens? I'm just putting a challenge out to you. Just try it. Just pray to God. And she gave me the Lord's Prayer and said, why don't you just pray the Lord's Prayer? And I'm not telling you have to, but just try it. See what happens. And one day I did what she said. I got down and I prayed the Lord's Prayer and I thought about each word I was saying. And it was at that moment that I did start a relationship with God and I felt God's presence there in the room with me. And it was just an experience that I can't explain to you. You have to experience it yourself, because people say, well, scientists might say, well, if you can't see it, it's not real. But I knew it. It's kind of this deep knowing in my soul, and this knowing came about me, this deep knowing that it is real, it is so. And then from that moment on, the relationship started to build. So I would say, hey, don't take my word for it, like you said, Deb, earlier on. Just experience it for yourself. Just take that leap of faith to even try the relationship, just to, do a quick prayer, see what happens, but keep your heart and your mind open to allow that relationship, just to try it out. Because, hey, I didn't believe at 12 years old. To me, it sounded ridiculous. But, it can't hurt to try.
I got to tell you, what's the worst thing that could happen? Give it a try. Prove yourself wrong. I mean,
yeah.
And see what happens. And I think that's awesome. And you had the courage to change. You were open. I had, and I think there's a lot of similar stories like that. I mean, I'm looking at Twitter and I see that Jessica Solsana, she's listening in to us right now, and her story is amazing. I tell you, I've met some great people on Twitter too. And she was molested and abused, younger. And you know what she does now? She works with people in California. She's helping children break free. She's an advocate. Okay, guess what? That's a horrible thing that happened to Jessica. Nobody wishes that on her. God doesn't wish that on her either. But all these other people that are being helped because of her turning that bad thing into something good, who's to say? Who's to say? How could you say that that's bad? Do you know what I mean? Because it's changed. It's like, you can have, it's like the periodic table of elements. You just change one component, oxygen, by itself, and then you just change it. H2O becomes something completely different, and it's never the same. It's the scrambled egg syndromes, scrambled eggs, omelets. No, it doesn't go back to what it was, and it can't. Okay, it's just not going to happen. But it can be something else, and and once it's changed into that, then it can't, go back to something else either, So when we've changed ourselves to have that faith in God, when we've changed ourselves to have that experience in our own life that something bad has become something good, we build up that net to catch more of the good stuff. Because once we have one experience, then we can have another, and then we can have another. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with the right people. If you want to know what a person thinks, look at all the books they have on their shelf. You want to know what a person's like, look at the people they're associating with. Be very, very, very careful. Be very careful who you associate with, what you watch, what you read, who you listen to, and make sure it's something, the software you want to buy, because don't buy the lie, because you'll just get more of that, and it won't work.
Oh,
trust me, I've lived a lot of that stuff too.
I love that you're mentioning that, because we, on a daily basis, me, myself included, we go through life listening to stuff, hearing stuff on TV, and not realizing that all makes up our general programming inside our subconscious that we just operate on without thinking about it all throughout our day. And it it actually makes the life we see in front of us. And then we think we have no control over it. But if bit by bit you eliminate the negative reading or negative programming on TV, it really does make a difference in your outer life.
Well, yeah. Miss Super G is saying she's loving the show. She's listening in, so we'll give a shout out there. Thank you so very much. We've had some great comments coming through on Twitter. Thanks, everybody.
Oh,
you guys are the best people we know. That would be us. Time flew by.
Yes, it did. Well, before we go, and I let you leave your last notes and advice to our listeners, I want to let everyone know to get Deb's monthly Mind Vitamin newsletter on her website. You can go to www.greenskyandbluegrass.com, and please go listen to Deb Scott's show. It's amazing. It's the best people we know. So you just go to blogtalkradio.com, the best people we know, and you'll find her show. And Deb, thank you so much for coming on. And everyone, also, I just want to let you know again, you can find Deb Scott's amazing book, The Sky is Green and the Grass is Blue, on Amazon. You know, I'm sure you can also get it on Barnes & Noble.
Kindle, $3.99 on Kindle. I just got it up on Kindle, so
awesome.
Very
you can't
excited.
beat that. Well, thank you,
Listen,
Deb.
I'll tell you what, it took me a lot more than $3.99 to learn those priceless lessons that I'm sharing, let me tell you.
Well, what would be your last words of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, let's see. I think they should follow your show because I know that you are your featured host, and they can follow you by following that little button. If you don't have a Blog Talk Radio page, let's give a shout out to Blog Talk Radio. Is it not a great venue?
Yes, girl, so many people have come to me saying, I want to start my own show. Where should I go? I'm like, Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah, I know, it's great. And you can get a free show page, and then you can just follow, you know, like with you know, your image there. You can, there's a little follow button underneath. You know, I think that it's how I just want to say and send out a prayer and avalanche blessings to everybody, whether you're listening live or on replay, that I don't think it's an accident that, you know, you're following Savvy Central or you're here today and you've joined us for this time. And just consider the possibility that maybe God is trying to push you a little bit to step into your greatness and to consider a new way of thinking, doing, and being, and realizing that, you know, the 7 billion people in the world, how many thoughts everybody's having, you know, there's a lot of information out there that you don't know. So just consider that whatever you're thinking is the worst or the best, whatever it is in your life, wherever you're at right now, whatever problem, whatever trouble, joy, or happiness, consider the possibility that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the tip is the smallest part of the iceberg, as my friend Marnie Spencer says in her book, The Iceberg Principles, which I just finished reading, another great book. You know, we just don't know what we don't know. So let's help each other discover. And if each person is a gift, it's our responsibility to unwrap ourselves. The world needs you to share your one-of-a-kind shine. And when you have a light in a room and you bring others into it, you know, it just gets brighter. It doesn't get less. So I really think that what we need to do is say a prayer that God would help us be the best person we were created to be. Not the person next to us, not somebody else, yourself. And that's what the world needs, is you. So as Oscar Wilde says, be yourself because everybody else is already taken. And those are my final thoughts. And thank you very much for joining me and having me on as a guest on your show. It's been a privilege and an honor.
Oh, thank you, Deb. You are amazing. And just on that note you had mentioned prior, everyone, please go out there, live your best life. And I've heard a bunch of people out there saying, hey, we want to do a show like what Deb's doing, what I'm doing on Savvy Central Radio. And I'm sure there's many out there who have great gifts to share with the world and expertise they want to get out there and wisdom to put out to the universe. And yes, you can start your own show on Blog Talk Radio. So due to all of these requests for wanting people to get their own Blog Talk Radio show up and going, I'm doing a free live call this Friday, which will be the show, where anyone can call in with all their podcasting questions to get started on Blog Talk Radio, and I'll help you out. So come join us on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern on this channel, and you can always call in at 718-664-6303. And again, Deb, I want to thank you so much for coming on Savvy Central Radio. And everyone, I also want to let you know, please go to Deb Scott's website to get all her wonderful information, get her vitamin newsletter at, again, www.greenskyandbluegrass.com. And again, Deb, thank you so much for coming on Savvy Central Radio.
Thank you, and love hugs. And I'm going to be promoting that show you're doing on Friday because that's awesome. That's going to be awesome, too. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Savvy Central Radio is proud to host our 4th symposium. Join us in our new multi-part speaking series called Mastering the Influence Game, starting this fall in New York City. Every 2 months for the next several months, we'll be bringing you global cutting-edge experts in the field of influence, marketing, and media, designed to give entrepreneurs and small business owners the tools and strategies to take their business to the next level. To register and book your tickets today, go to masteringtheinfluencegame.eventbrite.com.